Our guy Ryan Wilson has a brand new 2022 mock draft on CBSSports.com. Looks very much the same at the top. Kayvon Thibodeaux out of Oregon, the #1 overall pick. Going to the New York Jets. Now these projections for the teams who draft in this order based on reverse Super Bowl odds. So that's why you had the Jets, a team with 2 wins, drafting ahead of a team like the Jaguars, the Texans, or the Lions, who are winless so far. I guess we're thinking the Lions are going to win multiple games this season, right? If they have the #4 overall pick. Let's dive into this thing with Ryan Wilson, who has the full first-round mock on CBSSports.com. Brady Quinn is with me. I'm Chris Hassel. Danny Cannell is with us as well. Ryan, when are you going to throw us a curveball there at #1? It's Thibodeaux every week.
Yeah, something crazy is going to have to happen, Chris. But also worth noting, Dan Campbell runs the reverse Super Bowl odds, so that's why the Lions aren't picking first overall, but that will certainly change. But yeah, Kayvon Thibodeaux is the guy, partly because there's no real quarterback in this draft class to get your attention. This isn't like last year's draft class with Trevor Lawrence, or even the year before with Joe Burrow, who came out of nowhere. We have yet to have someone come out of nowhere in terms of the quarterback position. So what do? You fall back on the safe player. 2 years ago, before we knew who Joe Burrow was, that was Chase Young. And Chase Young is playing pretty well, at least starting to play better this year. Had a really good rookie season. Kayvon Thibodeaux has very few holes. I don't know where you might look. Maybe lack of consistency from every single play, but he is so explosive off the edge. And when he wants to get after it, he gets after it. And there's very little offensive tackles can do about it. He did suffer the ankle injury early in the season, came back and played really well against UCLA a few weeks ago. And if he continues to stay healthy and continues to do the things we've seen him do this season and in previous seasons, I don't see how he doesn't go #1. Worst case, #2 if something happens where maybe an offensive lineman moves up there. But I don't think a quarterback is going to find their way to #1 regardless.
I'm being told by our producer, Mayron, that not only does Brady Quinn not necessarily believe that he should go #1, but that he might not even be the best pass rusher in this class.
I think he's got a lot more competition than we're willing to give out. You know, a guy named Aiden Hutchinson who leads the Big Ten in sacks, you could throw him into the mix. I think he kind of reminds me of almost a Jared Allen when you look at his body type, the way he moves. But the bottom line is, when I watch Kayvon Thibodeaux, I really haven't seen him do anything that makes me say, okay, he's the guaranteed #1 player in the country right now. There's no doubt he's got great burst off the edge, good length, all those things. But when you look at his production, too, in sacks, it's down a bit. And really what they've come from is, for example, UCLA had 2 sacks in that game. Played well, but he also got one of those sacks when he was working isolated versus a tight end. Fresno State had one early in the year, Cal, not necessarily known for their offensive linemen. That's where some of that production is coming from. So there's things you definitely see and you like about him, but I don't see him impacting the game the same way Chase Young did, even when he was still getting double teams or they were sliding or giving a chip to that way, his way. I don't know that he's quite as dominant as some of the other past DNs that we've seen go #1 or up there at the top of the draft. So I still want to see more from him. Look, I wish he would have played against Ohio State. I think that would have been the best offensive line he may even see all year, depending on what happens with Oregon's schedule the rest of the way. So at this point, we could put him at #1, but I still would like to see more from him at this point in time in the season.
I don't know. The UCLA game I thought was pretty impressive. I thought he took over that game, and I know exactly what you're talking about, too, when he was matched up on a tight end, but he still had several tackles for a loss, had the forced fumble. I would have loved to have seen him against Ohio State as opposed to, in street clothes rooting on his teammates as well. I think he'll go #1 just because there is something there when they see him, as the specimen that he is, because he is a physical freak. And I do think at his top tier, he does pop and showcases that ability to come off the edge. So I think it's there. But I think you bring up a great point. Like, there are some guys out there that are going to challenge this position. But when I think it's all said and done, I think Thibodeaux does go #1.
Honestly, the guy when I watch film at Oregon is Brandon Dorlus, #3. Like, he's always the guy who pops, and granted, plays more from the interior, but he's a guy who pops more on film from time to time than even Kayvon Thibodeaux does. And look, again, maybe that has to do with Thibodeaux getting more attention, but you don't see it quite as much. I mean, not compared to some of the edge rushes we've seen go that high in the draft in previous years.
Philadelphia Eagles have 3 picks in the first round, and in our latest mock here from Ryan, 3 picks in the top 16. And Ryan, you're going all defense here.
Yeah, the defense stinks. I mean, you can make an argument for a quarterback, but are you going to take a quarterback that high? Are you going to trade a bunch of draft picks to get one of these free agent quarterbacks, Deshaun Watson or whatever? Let's assume you don't do that, and Jalen Hurts is going to be your guy. Okay, I get it. You could, look for offensive line perhaps. But again, the defense has to get better. So why not get 3 fantastic athletes, guys who are playing really well this year? Of that bunch, I think I might like Nakobe Dean the best. He's an absolute missile coming downhill. He can drop into coverage if you want him to. He plays like these linebackers we've seen, these off-ball linebackers who've come out the last 7-8 years. He plays like every single one of those guys who come to the NFL and have success early as young players who just get after it. We see it time and time again. And you can say, well, he plays behind Jordan Davis. He doesn't need Jordan Davis. He will take on blocks. He will shoot gaps, and he will make plays behind the line of scrimmage. Jordan Davis had nothing to do with that play we just saw there. So I think if you're the Eagles and you're looking to get better on defense and you're okay with Jalen Hurts for now, I think it makes a lot of sense just to stock up with these three first-round picks, or perhaps move up and down the board in the first round and find some guys that fit holes that you need to fill. But the way I have this laid out, I have no issue with Leal, Andrew Booth Jr., who's really good and a really young player who just needs experience, and of course, Nakobe Dean, who I just talked about.
The crazy thing about that list of all 3 defensive players, you could just say, hey, take Nakobe Dean, but then go ahead and look at Jordan Davis at the number 6 pick overall. Darian Kendrick, maybe the cornerback, was from Clemson, transferred to Georgia this year. He's having an outstanding year as well. You could almost make it the entire Georgia defense. You get all those draft-eligible guys, bring them to Philly, let them all play together. And maybe you're getting a little bit of what we're seeing in college football right now, which is absolute domination. I don't mind this going all defense. We've seen some teams do this before. But this also does look like the trade package that I'd be trying to give up to get Deshaun Watson as the quarterback of my team if you felt like all the off-the-field stuff wasn't an issue for you.
I totally agree with you, too. If you're going to go, why not go the route of the Raiders and Mike Mayock? Remember, they got all the Clemson guys. That hasn't exactly worked out that fantastic for them. But I like the mindset because there is that much talent on there. I think DeMarvin Leal's a name, too. That's another physical specimen up front on the defensive line from Texas A&M that could be one of those impact players right away. I think also the fact that there's still, that you still kind of need a quarterback. I'm not sold on Jalen Hurts in the future there. That is pretty glaring that there's not that obvious option here where, okay, Philly's got their guy for the future either. And if that's the case, I wouldn't waste a first-round pick on a quarterback either. I'd go with 3 defensive guys too.
Yeah, and in the first round of this latest mock, Matt Corral, first quarterback taken, Washington at 7. Then Ryan had the Broncos at 11, taking Carson Strong. Down at 30, though, it's the first time we're seeing Malik Willis, the dynamic quarterback out of Liberty. You have him going to the Detroit Lions with their 2nd pick in the first round. Ryan, that's the first time you've had Willis in the first round, right?
That's right, absolutely, Chris. And here's the thing. I watched Malik Willis over the summer, and honestly, he looked like a day 3 guy. And I'm not being disrespectful. That's just the games I watched. It didn't blow me away because he was getting talked up so much. I was at the Syracuse game in person watching him there, and he made a lot of improvements. And he felt like a day 2 guy, perhaps the middle of the 2nd round guy. But what happens is these quarterbacks get pushed up the board because teams need quarterbacks, and you can sometimes talk yourself as a front office person into quarterbacks that probably shouldn't go as high as you want them to go. So here, what's up with Malik Willis? Well, guess what? This week they play Ole Miss. That will be his biggest test of the year. He played okay against Syracuse, who has a surprisingly not terrible defense. He wasn't great, but he was okay. I think against Ole Miss and Matt Corral, if he's healthy, he has to ball out. He has to get people's attention. He has to prove that he can play against big-time competition. And then I think that could build some momentum as we go into the offseason and the pro days and the Senior Bowls and all the other things we have to go through to get to the NFL draft. He has a lot of tools. He is very exciting. He does a lot of the things that Matt Corral does, that a lot of these mobile quarterbacks do who are strong-armed, but he just hasn't done it consistently enough for me to be a first-round pick. That doesn't mean a team won't take a gamble on him at the bottom of the first round and maybe even earlier as we go through this process.
There is not one quarterback we've discussed in the last couple weeks or when I see mock drafts up there that I'm just, okay, this is a lock first rounder. It's a very, very shaky quarterback class. But if Malik Willis pops at the combine at his pro day, we've seen guys all of a sudden come out of nowhere and they start rocketing up the boards, and all of a sudden teams start to reach for quarterbacks because it's the most important position in the game. And Malik Willis was a name. Totally agree with you, Ryan. Last year did a ton, put the team on his back, but a lot of it was through through his running the ball, a little bit too much running, in my opinion. He needed to showcase a little bit more throwing the ball, which he's done this year. The one game that kind of jumps out to you that he's put in the rear view, thankfully, is the Louisiana Monroe game, which was his worst game this year, but it's good to see him bounce back with a couple nice wins. But the game against Ole Miss, you are 100% right, because if I'm a scout, I'm throwing in the Syracuse game, and I'm throwing the game against an SEC opponent in Ole Miss who's got, and even their defense isn't great, so it should be a great opportunity for Malik Willis to shine and show that he can go against the best in the country.
Malik Willis has a ton of upside. We know that. We've seen his ability to improvise. He's got a rocket for an arm. Consistency, I think, is what we're all talking about, what we're all looking for. And the tough thing is, look, he can only play the schedule he plays. And we know teams are willing to take risks on quarterbacks that played at a lower level. So that's not going to be the concern. What I'm kind of concerned to see is, one, how tall is he? We've got to list him at 6'1". A lot of times we get to the combine, that number changes drastically. So that could be a concern for some teams. And then, look, he's got some development still. Even though he's a guy who's played a number of years at the college level, there's still some things that he needs some refining within his game, especially playing for the pocket as a passer. Are they willing to be patient enough with him? You look at the San Francisco 49ers, they gave up a boatload of picks to trade up to number 3 overall and take Trey Lance, who was in a similar position, really didn't even play his final year before he was headed off into the draft, and only started 1 year at North Dakota State. Not saying that Malik Willis and Trey Lance are in the exact same position, but there is still some development needed there. Is this organization that's going to take Malik Willis in the first round, are they able to be patient? Are they able not to have to thrust him in there before he's ready? And then really, are they able to deal with the growing pains you go through when you put a quarterback in that position? So those are all questions that only one team in the first round has to be comfortable with in order to make that decision. And as Danny talked about and Ryan talked about, this may not be the best draft class right now, and maybe some teams don't even have a first-round grade on these guys, but that doesn't mean there's not going to be one team that does and decides to make that selection come 2022.
Yeah, not a lot of top-line quarterbacks in this draft as of right now. There were 6 wide receivers taken in the first round of Ryan Wilson's latest mock. You can find that thing on CBSSports.com. He does it every Monday from here until the end of time. Ryan, thank you so much for joining us. Danny Cannell, Brady Quinn as well. You can hear all 3 of them at times on the Pick 6 podcast. Will Brinson is there all the time. He doesn't miss a show. Your daily NFL fix with the fellas.
Do you want a sports network that delivers everything that matters about the game? The highlights, the picks, the instant analysis, no yelling, no fake debates, no politics. Hit the subscribe button and never miss a moment.